It's just a huge honor for me today to be podcast interviewing Kent Miller with Dentagraphics. Thanks so much for coming on the show. Kent is president of Dentagraphics, a market analysis company specializing in dental practices. Prior to Dentagraphics, he worked in the economic development sector in Columbus, Ohio, where he led a nonprofit urban revitalization firm. He holds a master's in science in city and regional planning from the Ohio State University, the only university where you have to say the before you say it. My gosh, and you're in Austin, Texas now, right?
I am in Austin, Texas.
So what was more fun, living in Columbus or Austin?
I'm going to be a homer on this one. I'm a Columbus guy through and through. I love Austin, but Columbus is home for me.
I love Columbus, and you're have a master's in science in city and regional planning. I bet that's an unbelievable degree to have in Dentagraphics. The thing I like most about Columbus is my parents were very, very Catholic, and Columbus, some smart genius. A lot of churches eventually just closed down. They the area demographically collapsed, and next thing you know, the church just closed it down. And somebody bought, remember that restaurant, the Refractory? Somebody bought a bankrupt, closed down Catholic church and turned it into the most rocking hot, amazing steakhouse. And it was just really cool. I mean, I just thought it was an amazing theme. And man, it was packed every time I've eaten there. Every time I lecture in Columbus, I always eat there. But you know what? I tell these dentists, I tell them over and over and over that the most important decision they're ever going to make in their entire life is what you do. So what do 99% of them do? Oh, they just skip it. They don't think demographics matters. I say, okay, well, if it doesn't matter, go to the Congo. Go set up in Afghanistan. In fact, why set up in Austin, Texas? Just move down south of the border to Mexico. Practice there for a few years, then call me back. Demographics is the king, and the franchises perfect it. Chick-fil-A and McDonald's, Starbucks, they put more effort into this, and the dentists skip it. And they just think that, they say, well, if you build it, they will come. I'm like, dude, that was a fiction Disney movie. It's not even real. So what percent of dentists do you think actually get a demographic report before they set up their own de novo or buy an existing?
Sure. My off-the-cuff estimation is about 10 to 20%, and most of them feel comfortable. Now, we certainly do speak with a lot of doctors who do see the importance of the demographic analysis, and importantly, what we do is there's a big focus on competition analysis as well. So if you're Starbucks and there's already a Caribou and a Cup of Joe and 5 other coffee shops right there, maybe there's another neighborhood down the street where there aren't any coffee shops. I think you hit the nail on the head there, and a very strong endorsement. I appreciate that.
And another thing, you got to know your competition. So if someone says, well, in this town, okay, so you're looking at buying 2 practices. This small town of 5,000 is 4 dentists, and this town of 5,000 is 4 dentists. Well, your competitors are not even Steven. I'll give you an example. There's a chain of laundromats around Phoenix. And one of them decided their best idea was to put one across the street from the dry cleaner that I use. Well, that dry cleaner is owned by 2 Korean immigrants, Byung and Young. And those guys work 7 to 7, Monday through Saturday, for the last decade without blinking. Now, do you really think you're going to have a franchise, then hire a bunch of employees? What are they going to work, 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, maybe early morning? When you're going against 2 people who are willing to work 12-hour days, 6 days a week until they drop dead, you don't compete against that. You can't compete against those guys. And sometimes they'll say, well, there's the dentist population ratio is this. Yeah, but half of them are 60 to 65. They're winding down. They're working 2 days a week. They don't have a website. They don't do direct mail. They're just falling off the cliff. Whereas another competitor might be some rockin' hot, high energy 30-year-old bouncing off the walls who's in all the parades and going into the schools and churches, so I like the way that you actually call and verify the competing dental offices, don't you?
We do, and part of the reports, as you mentioned, is We're also looking at the character of competition. So as you mentioned, we'll look at, for instance, the 20 nearest practices to a proposed location. So if a doctor wants to start up or even purchase a practice, we analyze those 20 nearest practices. Do they have a website? Do they have reviews online? Are they spending on Google AdWords? Or are they small-time practices? When you call, nobody answers the phone. And half of them, like I said, don't have websites. And as you said, they're slowing down. So we provide that analysis, and I think it's a really important piece as well. As you were discussing, are there 10 doctors there? Is there one doctor there? What do we think about who these competitors are?
Those winding down selling practices. I mean, the S&P 500, one of the biggest barometers to tell the health of the economy is you got a healthy amount of mergers and acquisitions going on. And every time I've ever met a dental office that does 2, 3, 4 million a year, every 5, 6, 7, 8 years, whenever the old man 5 miles up the road, closing shop, put his practice up for sale, they would buy the practice and roll it into theirs. And you get the third person endorsement. Like if I buy Dr. Kent Miller's practice, he sends a letter to everyone, says, you know what, I'm retiring, and the best guy up the street is Howard, and he's going to take over all my patients. So they all come in thinking, oh, well, I love Dr. Miller, and I went there forever, and then now he wants you to take care of us. And then I take the purchase price of that practice and divide it by the number of active patients that came and became patients. And usually that number is under $150 a head. And then you go look at their acquisition costs of new customers with Google ads and Facebook ads and direct mail and all that stuff. They might be paying $175 or $200, and still there's a big difference. Because if I acquire you at $200 a head and you don't know me from Adam, you buy $1 out of 3. But if someone comes in with trust, they buy $3. And so if you come in off the street and I tell you you have 4 cavities and you don't know me from Adam, you're more likely to say, well, I just want to get my teeth clean. I don't have any problems. Let me think about it. But if you come in and you are referred by your sister who says she loves this practice, been going there 10 years, and they're great people, and I tell you have 4 cavities, you're like, dang, I need to get that done. So the mergers and acquisition activity, in fact, if I was looking at demographics, I'd want to know, hell, I think everybody should just have a demographic report just to see what the state of their area is, and always let the practice brokers know that you're educated on M&A activity, and will always be open to hearing a deal for anybody retiring. So what you've been doing this a long time. What should you look for in a market?
Yeah, so there's a few pieces of information that we're looking for, primary considerations. One I think is fairly obvious, and that's the level of competition. Now, the level of competition, though, we're going to adjust based off of who lives in the area. So if there's stronger demand in an area, well, then we can tolerate more saturation. But not everybody wants to work in a cosmetic environment necessarily. There's a lot of practice strategies that are perhaps Medicaid focused or maybe just more general PPO focused. So what we're looking for, those 3 big variables, are a match with a doctor's practice strategy and target patient base, the level of competition in the market adjusted to the level of demand, and then lastly, local considerations. So if you're in Manhattan or San Francisco, those are probably going to be really competitive markets. And I'm not saying that you can't start a successful practice in those markets, but you're probably not going to expect that we're going to find 4,000 residents per competitor in those markets like we might find in new growth markets near Houston or in smaller towns across the country. So we do adjust to local areas as well. And I think it's important to have that local context, as you were talking about with brokers. Well, what does a practice in Los Angeles cost versus what does a practice in Indianapolis cost? And those may be 2 very different figures. And it's important to have that piece of information as well.
When dentists call you, do they usually say, I don't care what's going on, I'm from Dallas, I'm going back to Dallas, that's where my mama lives, my sister lives? Do they usually do that? Or are they more open-minded and calling you and saying, look, I got $500,000 in debt, I need to go where I'm needed, where should I go? What's the breakdown?
About 80% of them are set on a market that they have ties to. It may be one market, it may be two markets. Maybe they say, well, I'm from Dallas, but my wife is from San Antonio, and we're interested in either market. And that category of doctor probably fits about 80% of our clientele. And then 20% will say, I want to be anywhere that is the most opportune market. I might have a few other considerations. Maybe I want to be near the mountains, or maybe I want to be in a city of at least 500,000 people. But yeah, about 20% or so are really wide open, and 80% are relatively fixed.
Huh, that's interesting. And what if someone just said to you, they call up and said, "Dude, I am desperate. I'm $500,000 in debt. I'll go to Timbuktu if that's what I need to do." Is there any areas of the country? I mean, it's hard to. I can't stand the term the United States of America because it makes no sense in economics. Like no one talks about the EU market. I mean, no one compares Germany to Greece. No one compares Italy to Denmark. So the United States is like 10 different countries flying under one flag. Where is it right now, a seller's market where you put up a dental office for sale and that day you'll get 3 bids and one of the bids will be over the listed price? And where are the markets where practices are more illiquid assets and can sit around for a long time?
So the areas that we see that are very demographically and competitively opportune are typically high growth markets. So the first level of development is residential development. So you might take what's called greenfield development. You'll have a field, a farm field, or perhaps some nature that's developed into residential. But no commercial brokers or developers are going to invest in that area until they might have tenants. Well, they're not going to have tenants until there are potential patients or customers for those commercial tenants. So we see the strongest opportunity in areas that report really strong population growth. That could be, generally those are in the Sun Belt. So Texas, North Carolina, Georgia, Florida. But we do hear a lot from doctors all across the country that they've been trying to purchase a practice for the last 2 years or 3 years, and there's just not much on the market. So that's a common finding everywhere for us, and it seems to be a tight market.
Yeah, Texas. I mean, that's the number one economy in a state right now. I also think a hidden jewel of Texas, they don't have any zoning laws. Right?
Not a lot.
I mean,
Houston in particular.
it's the least regulated in zoning, isn't it?
It's localities vary, but Houston in particular does not have a lot of zoning laws. They may not even have a planning department. I'm not sure. I know that they were the last major city to hold out on that front, but I'm not sure if they've
you hold a Master's of Science in City and Regional Planning from the Ohio State University. What do you think of the strategy of laissez-faire, unregulated Houston, almost no zoning versus a city, like especially when you get up in like Connecticut and New Hampshire and Vermont? I mean, these dentists will spend 5 years with lawyers and zoning councils just to put a little monument sign next to the street so that their customers driving by can just see it's a dental office. I mean, asking them to put a monument sign by the road, you'd think you were trying to legalize gambling and prostitution and bring in a casino. I mean, really, it is really tough in those old Northeast areas to get anything approved.
Yeah, and I think, and not to put the Northeast or the Rust Belt down too far. I'm from Ohio myself, as we've mentioned a few times. But in a lot of those markets, in addition to those zoning laws, there's just not a lot of population growth. So the patients that are there, they're getting older. They may not be having kids in the future to replace themselves 10 or 20 years down the line. So there's a number of problems that we see scattered across those markets. But to get back to zoning, by eliminating zoning laws, there's pros and cons to that, or by loosening zoning laws. In my opinion, there's pros and cons to it. The big pros are that there's a more perfect spacing of commercial uses and residential uses, so dental practices aren't stuck with the 2-mile square area that the central city government decided they could open their practice in, or that the ice cream shop could open in, with looser laws. And you're seeing this more now in form-based codes, which rather than dictate the use, that this is commercial or residential, what form-based code does is it says, and typically this is more progressive planning departments, they say this is what the building needs to look like, or be at this density, and here's some physical restrictions, but we don't care what you do inside, as long as you're not running a slaughterhouse or something like that. But that does allow a more perfect spacing of these uses so that you don't have all the dental practices within a 10-mile radius just clustered in one little area, and you can have more neighborhood or regional scale practices sort of scattered throughout the area.
So your first advice to these young kids is the Sun Belt is better than the North,
In general,
or the Rust Belt.
As you said, the United States, or even an individual state, Texas, for instance, that's a huge area. Not every site in Texas is great, and not every site in Connecticut is bad. But generally, if you said, hey, I'm going to throw a dart at this dartboard, where do I want to aim for? Typically the Sun Belt.
Okay, now same question, urban or rural?
Well, I think there's a couple of pieces that go into that. Some doctors, for them, it's going to be practice strategy and who they like to work with. For a lot of doctors, they grew up in either an urban environment or a rural environment, and that's where they want to practice. And I'm not going to say that if you are a country guy, that you need to move to Manhattan to open your practice because that's the only area of opportunity. But a lot of times we see stronger opportunity in suburban and small town markets, exurban markets, maybe an hour or so from the city, which I think works pretty well for most doctors because they do want to be near a city, near an airport, and near major amenities. But they don't necessarily need to open their practice right in the middle, right in the thick of it.
So you call that exurban?
Exurban, yes.
Spell that.
EXURBAN.
I've never heard that term. So yeah, I mean, I always thought it was silly because I know so many people who live in the suburbs, and they get up every morning. And they wake up and probably where there's a dentist for every 1,800 people, and then they commute an hour into downtown Phoenix where there's a dentist for every 350 people, and don't do well. And if they would have woke up in that morning and drove that same commute out of town, they would have come to these smaller towns of 17,000, 5,000, 9,000, like Florence, Eloy, and those guys down there are getting 100 new patients a month and just crushing it. So it seems to me that all the people I know with the long commute are commuting the wrong way to work.
Yeah, and now I will say one thing is population density is certainly a consideration there. So if you're in that market of 5,000 or 10,000 people and a new practice opens up, that's going to take a big hit on the level of competition in that market. Whereas if you're in a more densely populated market, maybe it's just a suburban community, or maybe it is the downtown or near downtown market. When a new practice opens up, it's not quite as big of a deal because you've got 60 or 100,000 patients to go around amongst you rather than 5,000 or 10,000.
Yeah, when you talk about, the deans, for years, they kept thinking if they increase class size, that will push more people out into the unmet areas. I mean, some of these states like Kansas, Nebraska, I mean, some of them, they average, 10% of them small towns don't even have one dentist. But now what they have found out that what you just said, if you accept a dental school student from Manhattan, he sure as hell ain't going to go to Beaumont, Texas. And so the real answer to rural is not dental therapists and a bigger supply of dentists. The real answer is that the deans start hiring people, accepting people from small town rural America. And if they would just sit there, and other countries have figured this out too. You want people to go to to rural outreach. Those got to be your dental students. And, they should just ask you, the first question, do you like the Rolling Stones or Garth Brooks? And if they say the Rolling Stones, you're vetoed. You're out. Get out of here. And, you just need a bunch of country western good old boys from small towns of 5,000 out where, if you accepted a dental student from every damn rural town in America that didn't have a dentist, and you did that for 4 or 5 years, problem solved. Because you're not going to get the city boy to go turn into a country boy, just like the country boy doesn't want to live in Scottsdale. I mean,
Right.
I found it very hard. I grew up in Kansas, and I moved to Phoenix, and to me, it was a culture shock that the police would get mad when I had 4 boys, when my 8-year-old was riding his mini bike down the street, and and the other one, shooting a 22. I mean, this is kid stuff. I mean, what kid doesn't ride around on a mini bike and shoot with a 22? I mean, but in Phoenix, it was like we were just batshit crazy, and the whole neighborhood was like, "What the hell's going on in that house down there?" And so they just need to go country boys, and a lot of that is who you marry, and a lot of dentists, the only ones that come out of school that I know, that I see, where year 1 they'll do $1 million and take home $350. They're always the only guy in a town of like 3,000 or less, and the only ones that do it is LDS, because they come out of school with already 2 kids walking, 1 in the oven. They might have $500,000-$600,000 in debt, and they don't need the big city because their party's the family, and
Right.
they don't care where they go. They got the whole fun and games all wrapped up in the family, and they'll go someplace where they're absolutely needed and just crush it.
Yeah, actually, I want to. I wish I had the commenter's name, but it was a comment on Dental Town, actually. There was a thread about should I look, everywhere seems kind of saturated. I thought about San Francisco. I thought about Denver. What should I do? And there was a really, I thought, insightful comment from a doctor, somebody who I don't think was a demographer, who said, well, do you want to live next to the major airport and next to the ocean and next to the mountains? Well, so do a lot of other people, and especially dentists who can afford to do so. But if you're willing to live in a town that's maybe not quite as much of a party, you might be able to find quite a bit less competition.
Yeah, and what I've seen is like, everybody wants to build a dental office that looks into the Pacific Ocean from San Diego all the way to LA, Monterey, San Fran, and they just die. I mean, almost nobody's successful doing that. And then you'll find other people who will go an hour inland or all the way to Bakersfield and work 4 10-hour days, Monday through Thursday, and then get in their airplane or their Porsche and fly into LAX, and then have $1 million condo looking over the ocean Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Those are the people. I mean, if you want to live in Aspen, well, go find some little town in Colorado without a dentist, do 4 10s, and then spend a 3-day weekend in Aspen, But I'm pretty sure Aspen doesn't mean it does. So, if someone says to you, what's the perfect location? Is there such thing as a perfect location?
We don't think so. And I think part of our role is to set expectations as to what you might find in the real world. So the market is imperfect. There's not a 100% correlation between supply and demand, or population density and supply. And you do find hidden gems. But we do work with especially a lot of earlier phase doctors who want to find that location that has 10,000 to 1 saturation, and median household income is $150,000 a year, and they've got the property on the corner, and by the way, the property's cheap. So there's typically trade-offs, in 95% or maybe even 100% of the practices we look at, we can say there is some kind of trade-off here, and if you want to be in an area with strong demand, well, other doctors probably figured out there's strong demand there and they opened up. So there isn't really a perfect location. There's not one specific thing we're looking for. It varies from doctor to doctor, but often or I should say almost always, there is some kind of trade-off. And I think that's a big role that we serve in those early phases.
Gosh, to me, the rules of thumbs are, if you're 2 hours from a major airport, you almost don't need demographics. Some of these kids that are smart as hell, I was talking to one kid the other day, he found a county that had no dentist with 7,000 people in it. 2,500 were in the town, 7,500 in the county, no dentist. I mean, you just have he won't have to take a PPO. So everyone else charges $1 for a crown, but they sign up for all these PPOs, so their $1,000 crown, they have to adjust it off to $600, and their overhead on that crown might be $400, and then they'll go into a small town. They won't charge $1,000 for a crown; they'll charge $1,200 for a crown, and they won't have to adjust it off for a PPO price. I mean, they'll go into a county like that. They won't take Medicaid, Medicare, no PPOs, no nothing, and they'll sit there and the first or second or third year out of school, in that 1 year, they will show the IRS what their entire student loan indebtedness was. I mean, they can walk out $350,000 student loans in year 1, 2, or 3. They made that much money. And if they live below their means and just stay in an apartment or whatever and sock away cash, I mean, that is just, but like you say, 80%, they don't want to do that. So when you say you got to match the practice strategy, what if some kids listening to you in dental school right now or they're working associate, do you see any types of strategies more successful than the other? For instance, does everyone want to be a cosmetic dentist and no one wants to do Medicaid? Or, I mean, is there any business strategies that you think are in more demand and more successful than others?
Well, I think to go along with the theme that we've been talking about a lot so far is, and this would be an appropriate practice strategy in many cases, would be bread and butter dentistry. So if you're willing to live, an hour or so from the major city in those exurban markets, where you're a general family dentist, but there's not a lot of competition or maybe no competition, that's a really clear way. I think probably the most predictable way to do fairly well. Whereas if you want to open a cosmetic practice in Buckhead outside of Atlanta or uptown Dallas, it's going to be a much more competitive market, and there's going to be a lot more information to filter through. Even after you run your demographic study, you're going to, over the course of a few years, you're going to get to know who the other practices are in the area and how they're positioning themselves within the market. There's a lot less of that information to filter through when you open a general family dental office an hour outside of a major city.
You know, there's some also amazing practice. You're down there in Texas, where the Texas Dental Association, the branch of the American Dental Association, some boy down there was saying he was specialized in implants. So they sued him because the ADA only has their 9 specialties, and that's not one of them. They're oral surgeons and periodontists do not like this guy saying that. So I went to the court, and Texas court said, ADA, you're a club. You're a membership club. You're not a gosh darn government agency. We don't care what you say. And furthermore, this guy does specialize in implants. That's all he does. Even lying to the consumer. And so now that specialties, there's no state board of dental examiners that cares about your membership club, especially. But I've found a lot of dentists who say they're 10 years out of school and they just love endo, or they love perio or whatever. But I've seen it mostly with endodontists. And so they're married, they got kids, they don't really want to go back to endo school, but then they'll go find a small town, 50,000 people, and there's 10 dentists in there, and he'll just walk around there and press the flesh, say, look, I'll move here and set up, and my practice will be limited to endo, and I swear I'm not going to steal your patient, I'm not going to do the crown, I'm not going to hire hygienists, I'm going to act just like the endodontist in the big city, practice limited to endo. And you would not believe how many people that even general dentists refer endo to that think that endo guy is an endodontist who never even went to endo school. And they just practice limited to endodontics. And and of course, way back in the day, like when Ben Johnson, who started Tulsa Dental Products, the inventor of Thermophil, they didn't even have the endo specialty, so they were grandfathered. And John McSpadden, who made the McSpadden condenser. I mean, they were grandfathered, and most dentists think those are 2 of the greatest endodontists that ever lived. And so that's another demographic gold mine. If you're sitting here listening to this and you're saying, my God, I wish I could just do endo, or I wish I could just do perio, or I wish, whatever, that's another demographic play, because you actually call the competition. Like this guy said, I'm looking at Nevada, Missouri, you'd actually call him. Well, in fact, tell me, there's basically only 3 people I know that do this in dentistry, which is kind of weird since there's 211,000 Americans who have a license to practice dentistry. What does Dentagraphics.com do differently? And by the way, I love that YouTube video you have on there, and I was going to ask you if I could put that into the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. So Dentagraphics, I think there's a few things that we do really well. And the first one that I always like to emphasize is that the reports, the backbone of the reports is the data that goes into it. So it's extremely important that both the demographic data and the competition data is accurate. There are databases out there. When you register your business, you tell I forget who you're registering with, but there's what's called the North America Industry Classification System, NAICS code, and you say, I'm a dental office. But those businesses aren't always registered, or the business isn't always registered at the physical, actual location of that practice. So we've audited those lists, and we found significant errors in them. Not to mention they didn't say really who was practicing at those locations. So we developed a method that actually involves a research team of people going through the combination of a few databases and calling those practices and making sure that they're at the address that we have on file and that they're within the specialty that we have on file. So if I'm working with a doctor who says, hey, Kent, I opened up your report here and I see there's 7 practices within a 2-mile radius. Can you tell me who those 7 practices are? Absolutely. We can tell you who they are, where they're located, if they've got a website, their phone number. So we're going the extra length to make sure that the data in the report is accurate. Secondly, I think that we had a really strong graphic design team help us out in the beginning. And it's really made the reports easy to read, the way that everything is laid out. And I know that one of the things that a lot of doctors say is that, hey, I went to school to be a dentist, not necessarily to run a business like this. So help me figure out, what do all these numbers mean? So I think we do really well with laying out the reports. And then lastly, we include a complimentary consultation call with every report where you're on the phone with the person who wrote your report to talk about the findings, any questions you have. Hey, how does my site here? You said it looks pretty good, but I'm looking in Topeka, Kansas. I grew up in LA. What if I thought about LA? What does that market look like? How might this site compare to a typical site in LA? And we can provide that info. So yeah, those are the 3 things that we do differently. And to get back to competition, we actually, even in our single site study report, which is the very last report when you found a specific location, we list out the 20 nearest competitors, the name of the practice, the address, website, phone number, Google reviews, Facebook likes, Yelp reviews, Google ad spend, and really talk about who they are and how we think that might affect the level of competition that's reported, because not all practices are created equal necessarily.
For my guest is they're driving to work right now, so if you follow me on Twitter, I'm at Howard Farran, and I just retweeted your at Dentagraphic. You were on episode 4 of the Delusion Dentist.
Yes.
Was that a fun podcast?
Yeah, that was Dr. Kingsburg was fun to work with, and I like his title there, the Delusion Dentist, and it's not all sunshine and roses, and you don't get to just wake up and make $500,000 year one, and you've got to put some work in. And that was a fun conversation. And actually, you mentioned earlier that 30-year-old doctor who's bouncing off the walls in the morning, and I immediately thought of him. I talked to him early in the morning, and he had already gone to work out, and he had some music blasting when I first called him, and I was impressed.
That is so amazing, and he lists the show on the Dentaltown app. So if you're listening to this on iTunes, there's 250,000 dentists on Dentaltown, and to think that you have 250,000 dentists in your iPhone in your pocket to ask any questions. But we started that genre 2 years ago, and now we have 39 dentists posting a podcast, and Delusion Dentist is one of them. Some of these podcasts are just on Dentaltown, crazy high number of views. There's let's see, this guy has how to open a dental office. He's posted 115 podcasts, and so far he has 675,128 views. That's crazy. And most people find the podcast first on the Dentaltown app, and then they subscribe to it on iTunes. So we're talking about, he's got 675,000 views. I bet his iTunes views blow that off the charts. You know what I mean? I mean, crazy. But the other one I retweeted was the fastest growing suburban markets according to Realtor.com, and you talk about your top 10 was Northeast Denver, Colorado, Wiley, Texas, Dublin, California, Daffy, Texas, Palm River, Clear Mill, Florida, Vista East, Florida, Cutler Bay, Florida, Milpitas, California, Williamsburg, Tennessee, Apex, North Carolina. And I thought that was just so interesting. I'd never even heard of one of those cities. Never even heard of one. So just because you're in dental school, you know, the biggest error in human thinking is they always know what they know, but they never know what they don't know. And you just gave me a list of 10 towns I never even heard of. I'm just wondering on that Wiley, Texas, is that where they filmed that Wiley Coyote and the Chasing the Roadrunner? Is that the home spot of the Roadrunner? But just amazing. Another demographic thing that's amazing is I think one of the craziest things is the metrics we use to value, like the S&P 500. It doesn't, you know, when you go get a report from a realtor about, well, here's a practice for sale and here's its estimate of what it's worth, and they don't even mention the employees. There's no HR, there's no human capital, and we sell a service. Like, what if there were two identical practices for sale, and one, the average staff member had been there 15 years, and the other one, the average staff member has been there 2 years? It doesn't show up in any of the metrics. What if you were going to pick an airline stock? Say you want to diversify into airlines and, you know, four or five different sectors, and you couldn't pick between two companies in oil and gas, and one had the average employee been there 15 years, and the other one, the average employee been there 7 years. Well, if you have a PhD in economics, you know that's going to affect the bottom line. It's going to affect the bottom line too. And another thing that they don't do on the practice valuations is they don't give you they just tell you what the office produces and collects. They don't tell you the value of what the doctor refers. So a lot of times I've seen some tragedy train wrecks in my backyard where some guy buys an office who was for a lot of money, and the guy was placing a lot of implants and doing bone grafting, and that kid didn't do that and didn't want to do that and wanted to refer all that. And it's like, okay, well, you paid for $1 million practice and 300 grand of that was implants. And now you just bought $1 million practice and referred 300,000, you know, total mismatch. And the biggest deals is when you go in there and buy some old man's practice who referred out all of his endo if you do most of your endo, or he referred out all of his extractions if you do extractions. The biggest one I ever saw, which was crazy, it was in Palmdale. This old man only did amalgam. I mean, he patched everything with amalgam. And for 45 years, all he did was MOD amalgams. And when they would break, he would do it. And then the guy who bought the practice doesn't do amalgam. And it was a little 3-chair practice that he bought for like $350. And about 3 times a day, with no insurance, one of those MOD amalgams would break in half, and he'd come in and he'd just prepare for a crown. And he was doing 3 or 4 crowns a day out of the gate. I mean, just so there's so much more, and that's why my favorite stock investors, like Warren Buffett, he's the number one investor of all time. He stays in Omaha. He doesn't even want to go to Wall Street. He doesn't want to get caught up in that stuff. And the other one, Peter Lynch, beating the street. He said all the other brokers want to stay in Manhattan and read all these sheets and reports. And he says, what I would do is I'd just every Monday, I'd leave town and I'd drive a big circle. And when I got to that place, I wanted to see, is it clean? When I walked in there, was I greeted? When I said, hey, can I see Kent Miller? And they said, oh, he's not here. Well, can I look around? Oh, we'd rather you not. He's like, this place is crazy. And then he'd walk into another place. It was clean. He was greeted. And he said, yeah, I'm a stock analyst in Wall Street for a company. And they said, oh, well, let me introduce you to Kent Miller. And he'd walk back there and you guys would chat and the guy would show off and show him the energy. And then he'd get back in his car and say, I don't care what the reports say. That's the guy you bank in. So understanding all this stuff is just so important. And as far as those young millennials, so many of them think that they're going to work 9 to 5 Monday through Thursday and be a millionaire. The 9 to 5, that's true. You can be successful 9 to 5, but 9 to 5 means 95 hours a week. It's a lifestyle. And the people who come out of dental school and they're humble and hungry and do the 9 to 5, 95 hours a week for a decade, you do that for a decade, you will live like nobody else for several decades till you drop dead. So do your 95 hours a week and just crush it. So what else do you think my homies need to know?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that you were mentioning, purchasing a practice, and we work both with startups and acquisitions. The majority are sort of inherently startups, but we absolutely do work with acquisitions as well. And as you've been talking about, well, let's look into the details beyond just the top line numbers of what this practice brought in last year, and thus it's worth this much. What sort of service mix is being offered, and how does my own mix of services match with that mix? Beyond that, maybe it was a doctor who had sort of been winding down for more than just 2 years. Maybe he'd been winding down for 10 years. And really, he's in a really, really opportune market without a lot of competition, but he just hasn't put in the work for a while. So I think that can help reveal the level of competition as well. Or maybe he was somebody who was just totally killing it in the most competitive market, and the average new doctor may not be able to walk in and put up the same kind of numbers. So I think that's sort of the medium to long-term perspective that we provide for a lot of acquisitions.
Nice. And so I want you to change gears completely. This is June 22nd, and 3 weeks ago, you just had 6,000 kids walk out of dental school, and they think they know all the secrets to the universe because they got A's in calculus, physics, geometry, and algebra, and it's going to take them a few years to realize that everything they learned, almost 90% of it, was just useless bullshit, especially the history, philosophy, algebra. And if you know the difference between geometry or trig, all that means is you have a lot of student loan debt. It's never going to help you. What advice would you give those kids?
Yeah, so I think, and we've touched on this a little bit as well, but really do your research when you're starting out. And don't just say, yeah, I got A's all through dental school and all through college, and I'm going to open up in Uptown Dallas, and I'm going to kill it. Really do your market research and figure out what's going on in that area. And of course, I'm saying that because that's what we specialize in. But I think there's a lot of importance to it. Our reports cost, all of them are less than $1,000. And if you see a few new patients every year because you were in an area that was significantly less competitive, you made your money back so quick.
So what if she was going to buy a practice, and she talks to a practice broker, and they say this, and she says, I want Dentagraphics to analyze this location. I don't want to buy an office. The average office, the hot spot of the market, the highly liquid dental practice is $750. By the time that practice gets over $1.5 million to $4 million, you pretty much can only sell it to Heartland or some big major DSO. It's really an illiquid asset. But if she was going to buy a practice for $750, can she? How many times can the buyer say, "I want a Dentagraphics.com report before I buy this"? Do you get many practice transition consultants getting a demographic report from you to attach to the packet of information?
We do, both transitions and commercial real estate brokers focusing on startups. And what that provides for their clients is an unbiased opinion about these locations, because brokers, whether they're doing startup real estate or they're doing a practice transition, are being paid when the deal closes. And for them to be transparent with their clients and say, hey, we're going to have this other company come and look at this site, and they're going to tell you what you think about, or what they think about it. Now, we're not the end all be all. Because you're in a competitive location, that doesn't mean you can't succeed based off of other factors that you're other factors in the market or how you run your business. But we provide that level of unbiased opinion. And as a result, we do have relationships with brokerages, practice brokerages, as well as commercial real estate firms who are looking out for their clients. And if a doctor is referred to me from a real estate agent, I'm not hesitant to say, if I think the location sucks, that it sucks. And the real estate agents, for the most part, are pretty understanding of that. They realize they've got a little more work to do.
Yeah, and on Dental Town, what are the most common questions about demographics that you see on Dental Town? What are homies usually confused about talking about? What section is that under on Dental Town? Do you know?
I believe you have a demographics section on there, or demographics and practice research. But I think they fall into two types. The first are the really early on doctors. They might even still be in dental school, and they say, "Hey, I grew up all over the country. I have no ties to any city. Where should I practice?" And as I mentioned earlier, we generally recommend the Sun Belt, exurban communities, and you went through that list earlier of the top 10 growing markets in the country. They're all in California or south of the Mason-Dixon line. You didn't hear anything in Connecticut or Ohio or Michigan, and that's where new patients are going, and that's where there's room for new practices.
Actually, the entire globe is moving from the poles to the equator. I mean,
Yeah.
the entire 7.5 billion herd of humans has been migrating towards the equator for as long as they've been walking around Earth.
Air conditioning has done wonders for that as well. The prevalence of air conditioning.
Yeah.
So we get that question a lot, and we're always happy to talk to a doctor about their specific needs or specific scenario as well. Maybe somebody says, "I'm open to anywhere except for Florida. I hate Florida," and we can help with that. Or maybe they say, "I'm open to anywhere. Tell me just where are the best markets," and we can help narrow that search down as well, with some considerations about, well, do you want to be near the coast? Do you want a small town, a big town, a medium town? And then the other one that I see on there a lot is, here's my current situation. I'm looking at a practice. There's 2,200 residents per dentist here. Median household income is $65,000 a year. What are your guys' thoughts on this? And that, we can help with that when we see all the numbers and we've got our formula plugged in, and we're always happy to provide info. But I think those are the two common questions right at the beginning and right at the end of the process.
I think there's whenever there's a change in demographics, there's a change in the business. And I think when the birth rate falls down, that changed things. When dental school went from almost all males to almost all females, most people said, well, something's got to change in there. I mean, it's too big of a huge change. I think these driverless cars is going to be the game changer, because what I see in the driverless car is that most people will tell you that when they work at a big company like Intel or whatever, and they're in their cubicle, 30% of their day is interrupted by some idiot coming by and saying, "Hey, what'd you do last night? Hey, did you see Game of Thrones?" and all this stuff. And they just won't left alone. So they say, well, when I work from home, I'm so much more productive. But then a lot of people that work from home have spouse, kids, all that noise. And to me, the driverless car is really going to push the suburbs out further, because imagine you're at home and you can't really get anything done. So you get in just a box, and it's just a desk and your computer, and you're just a 2-hour commute from 2 hours from downtown, and for 2 hours uninterrupted, nobody's talking to you, just hammering out all your reports and email and Excel. Then you go into work, you do all your meeting bullshit, and then as soon as that's done, you go back and then you finish up all your notes on a 2-hour commute home. I think driverless cars could change the complete thinking about location, and demographics for the whole entire country.
Transportation changes everything in real estate. Prior to cars, where did people live? Cities were super dense. There weren't a bunch of parking lots downtown because people were walking, people were taking carriages. And then after a while, you saw what were called streetcar suburbs, and that allowed, and this is prior to the popularization of individual cars, and that allowed a little bit further development out. Those are typically the older suburbs in most cities. And then you saw the car come along, and then things really started spreading out. In those locations that used to be out in the middle of nowhere, when Ohio State became a school and it's only about 2 miles from downtown Columbus, it was a rural area, which is shocking to me, because you can see the downtown from Ohio State now. You can see the skyline, and it's a very urban setting. And the potential to change that with driverless cars and allow people to live 2 hours from town or even further, and especially with the way that jobs are moving towards working remote and working from home and allowing people to live where they want to live, absolutely reducing the necessity to live near where you work will change real estate. It'll change residential real estate, and that'll have a huge effect on commercial real estate as well.
I'm very impressed with your credentials. I mean, you hold a Master's of Sciences in City and Regional Planning, so I got to have you weigh in on this. Half my patients that ever mention the Historical Society, half of them love it, and they're protecting some building out here that was made by somebody they named a street after. What's that guy's name? And what's the big famous guy? The designer, Frank Lloyd Wright Boulevard. Yeah. And, you know, like he made some little hole in the wall restaurant, so nobody wants to tear it down. And then the developers call the Historical Society the Hysterical Society and say that if those guys were dictators, we'd all be living in cow towns with saloons and places to park your carriage and tie your horse up. What's your assessment? Do you think they're more the Historical Society or the Hysterical Society?
Well, I think there are good historical societies, and there are probably some hysterical societies as well. What creates value in places that people love? It's the uniqueness of that place. Why do people love Manhattan or Boston? Or a lot of cities have an area or two that people just love, and it's touristy or it's a very popular residential area. And the strength of that place and its uniqueness is what preserves that value. But at the same point in time, you can't have a historical society hysterically start blocking new development to the point that everything stalls out. And you see this, it's a big issue right now in California, particularly in the Bay Area, where rent for everybody has just gone through the roof. And part of that is everybody makes $10 million a year out there, or there's a lot of them who do. But part of that is a really strict control on the supply of buildings. And there's these 2-story buildings right in the middle of downtown San Francisco. We can't knock them down. They're so old. Well, that means everybody else has got to start driving from 2 hours away because there's no new supply in that market. And now who can afford to live in those houses? Maybe it's somebody who's local and who's high up at one of the tech firms, or maybe it's a Chinese investor who doesn't even live there and they want to buy it just for the value of the real estate. So I think there's two sides to it. And historical societies, they do serve a good purpose, but they can't get out of control.
Yeah. So when you said to me that someone says they hate Florida, they don't want to practice in Florida, and it's so funny because if you understand demographics, you really know Florida. I mean, Florida is several different countries. I mean, Miami is the heart of Latin America. And then north of Miami, all the way to Boca Raton, every single person that lives there is from New Jersey and New York. And by the time you get up to, Gainesville, you're in southern Georgia. I mean, it's all country music and country folk people. And I think of Florida as at least 3 different states. You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, there's a lot of stuff in there. And I really do think the electric car is going to change everything. And it's amazing that we're sitting here talking when the guy at the forefront of that, Uber, the CEO, has been fired and stepped down. What did you think of that move?
I think there's been a lot of hype about Uber, and a lot of the media opinion recently has been about Uber is Silicon Valley out of control. I think Uber, or maybe it's not Uber, maybe it's Uber's replacement in the future, maybe Google masters it first, as Uber might have been stealing some of their technology. I do think the driverless car is going to get there. I don't know who's going to do it, but I think it's going to get there, both from a personal use and I think from a commercial perspective as well. And that's where the big money is going to be immediately. All of a sudden, you don't need nearly as many truck drivers anymore. And that'll have huge effects on the economy as well, which will ultimately have effects on dentistry. So it'll be really interesting, and it'll be tumultuous times, and hopefully in a good way.
Yeah, I bet he stepped down for that intellectual property. I have a big feeling that guy is so aggressive he probably hired a guy from Google that brought a lot of their know-how with him. That's my guess, based on nothing, but he just seems like that type of guy. But I think it's another on the demographics, like you said, like when you're in San Francisco where the government is trying to preserve yesterday and won't let you tear anything down and knock it down. When I was in New York, I was lecturing up in, I forgot where were we? Buffalo? We were lecturing in New York, and they banned Uber. Syracuse. Mm-hmm. It's like, really, dude, your best idea is to block the new technology to preserve a cab driver's job, really. And but whenever you think of demographics, I always think back when Hong Kong was handed back over from Britain to China, and a lot of the richest Chinese all moved to Vancouver because Vancouver is the shortest distance from Hong Kong. It's like on for a ship, and then when you go to like Seattle, that boat's gonna have to sail another couple hours, all the way down. And those Chinese millionaires were coming and buying the biggest, nicest homes in Vancouver and then leveling them because they weren't feng shui or whatever they wanted. Right, and all these people are outraged because here's this beautiful neighborhood and they're just leveling, these historic homes. And I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. And I'm like, this is great. You should be so lucky. They could have gone to any country in the world and they decided to knock down the house next door to you. That's a good thing. But it's but hey, I just want to tell you that Ryan, let's push out his YouTube video today. I want to push out your YouTube video today on all my social media, and then do this podcast because again, it's the most important thing that a dentist could do. Is just get their damn demographics right, and they know it's true. They know no one's talking in dental school that I think I'm going to go to Iraq. I think I'm going to go to Syria. Syria is my best idea. It seems to be in the news. Everybody's focused on it. Yeah, going to Syria would be your worst idea. So you won't go to Syria. You won't go to the Congo or Afghanistan. And when you look at a market like Texas or Florida or the Sun Belt, like just within Florida, just like I said, I mean, there's everything from Brazil to Mexico City to New Jersey and Newark to country music. I mean, there's so many diamonds in the rough, and you got to be smart about this. And how do my homies, what do they just want to talk to you? How do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, so certainly they can call the company line, and sometimes I answer that phone, sometimes somebody else. What's the company line? We're 888-715-1044. It's right on the website as well.
888-715-1044.
That's right.
And the website is dentagraphics.com.
Correct.
What if they're emailers?
They can email me at Kent, K-E-N-T, at dentagraphics.com. And certainly if they call and I don't answer the phone and they say, hey, I want to talk to Ken about something, I'd be happy to talk to him.
You're from Ohio. Where is Kent State? Kent State?
Yeah. It's northeast Ohio, closer to the Cleveland area. Kent, Ohio, actually.
It's in Kent, Ohio. Is Kent State?
Yes.
So, were you born in Ohio?
I was actually born in Connecticut.
Okay, I was just wondering if you were born after Kent State. I figured your dad went to Kent State and was a big Miller Brewing fan, and he would just drink a lot of Miller beer at Kent State and named his son Kent Miller.
Can't comment on the Miller topic, but we're all Buckeyes in my family.
All right. Well, hey, seriously, thank you for all that you do for dentistry. Thank you for all that you do on Dental Town. And you just got to beat it into these kids. Hopefully this podcast gets out to a lot of the people in dental school. They're never going to teach you any of this stuff, and it's the most important stuff. And if you and saying that going to Florida is all that, okay, I'm 100% Irish. That's like saying all Irish are alcoholics when it's only 38% of us. Right. You can't label an entire state as a yay or nay for dentistry. And right. even going into San Fran, where they have way too many dentists, the Asians, the dentists that were born in Asia, they'll analyze San Fran and say, okay, well, all the dentists born in America, they all work Monday through Thursday, 9 to 5. And then they'll find an area that's 5 miles by 5 miles where not one dentist is open Saturday or Sunday, and they'll go in there and they'll do 5 to 10 emergency patients on Saturday and Sunday, on almost every one of them in a nice neighborhood, getting a $3,000 root canal, billet and crown, and they'll do $30,000 on Saturday and $30,000 on Sunday. And then all the dentists born in America say, well, I would never go there because there's 20 dentists on that corner. Yeah, but if they're 20 American-born dentists, they're lazy as hell. I mean, they are. The dentists are lazy. I mean, you go into a dental office, they work Monday through Thursday, 9 to 5, and the 11 o'clock cancels. The staff will sit there for an hour, and at 11:30, someone will call up and say, yeah, I broke a tooth. Can I come down? And they look in the afternoon and say, we have no openings. Like, well, you've been sitting here for an hour. Why don't you have them come down right now and work through lunch? And they go, well, we're not working through lunch. We're tenured teachers with the school district, where we work at the Department of Motor Vehicles. They can almost not even break even for the day and close at 5. And at 4:30, someone calls and says, oh, I'm in severe pain. Can I come down? I'm sorry, we all work for the Dental Government Association, and we're all entitled to leave at 5. No one here hustles, stays late, unless they're a dentist not born in the United States. And every practice management consultant will tell you that privately at a table, but they won't say it publicly because they think it's politically incorrect. And I view politically incorrect as I'll tell you, because if I love, adore, honor, and respect you, I'd want to tell you the truth. And the truth is, all the practice management consultants will tell you that the dentists in America who weren't born in America, they hustle. They hustle, they work harder, they work extended hours, they work weekends. I'm in Phoenix, Arizona. And if you had a toothache on Phoenix, Arizona, you're completely out of luck. But if you were in a car wreck and broke your leg, hell, an ambulance would pick you up in 5 minutes, take you to a dozen different hospitals, and they'd be fully staffed. So there's a lot about Dentagraphics. And you really got to analyze your strategy, your competition. And again, like when you're my age, when you're 54, what's the difference between a Saturday and a Sunday? You know what, by the time you get really old and smart, would you rather go to the mall be off on the weekend and go to the mall on Saturday and Sunday, whenever Yahoo's there? Or do you rather go Monday morning, park right by the front door, walk right in there, the lady helps you, you get what you need, you're out in 10 minutes. Hell, by the time you're 50, you hate the weekend is when you bury yourself in the house and bar the front door, because that's when all the crazy is. Same thing on the streets. I mean, I talk to my police officers, they say in Phoenix, Arizona, they randomly pull over people at 8 o'clock in the morning, 10% get a DUI. By the time it's 9 p.m., it's like 20%. By the time it's 11 p.m., it's like half. And by the time it's 1 in the morning on Fridays and Saturdays, it's 90%. So when you're 54, you pretty much don't want to go out after dark.
Well, I mean, my thought on that, and I love working hard. And I think the other thing, though, is that the drive for the eventual laziness is the mother of all ingenuity and all inventions. And the guy who invented the nail or whatever, he did it because he realized this is going to make my job a lot easier. So I think working smart goes a long way as well. Rather than sitting there and banging your head on the wall, get a hammer and knock it down. So I think we fit nicely into that, demographics and a lot of other perspectives on the business side of dentistry as well. Don't make decisions that are going to make you have to work 1,000 hours a week when you could have made a smarter decision that would let you work 60 hours a week and produce the same.
Yeah. All right. Well, again, thanks for all you do, Kent Miller. And on that note, I'm going to go have me a Miller beer. And you said your name was German, Miller, which means the miller, which is milling hops and grains. And that would have been wheat and barley and all that. My last name, Farran, in Arabic means baker. Smith was a blacksmith. I love name origination. There's a lot of, when you go back to the old world, a lot of these names all meant an occupation. And a lot of kids grew up in America and they don't realize, because the guy, 80% of the people that came through Ellis Island couldn't read or write. On that note, thank you so much for coming on the show.
So, you are trying to decide where to open your new dental practice. How do you decide which area is better than another? There are many location-specific factors that make an area more or less desirable, such as the number of competing dental practices, the demographics of the patient base, and local infrastructure trends such as growth and access. Finding all this information and making sense of it all can be daunting and confusing. But what if there was an easier way to find and compare all the critical information you need to make the best decision for setting up your new practice? That's where Dentagraphics can help. We have 3 different reports corresponding to each phase of your search. Just looking around your city for the best areas in terms of your practice strategy and competition? Order the Area Analysis Report. Already have a few locations in mind that you'd like to know a little more about? Order the Multi-Site Comparison Report. Want to know everything about one specific location? Order the Single Site Study Report. You will learn if the location matches your practice strategy, whom your competition will be, and how they advertise. At Dentagraphics, our reports go above and beyond. We provide written feedback from a professional demographer, not just a data dump, and we always phone verify the competition. The Multi-Site Comparison Report and Area Analysis Reports include access to your own interactive map. And finally, all our reports come with a complimentary 30-minute consultation call. Ready to get started? Order the report that best suits your needs online today.